I'll be a wingman.
Awesome. Hello and welcome to the first Be More Digital Buddy Chat, where I chat with my buddies from across the non-profit sector. Sometimes we'll talk about projects we've been working on. Other times we'll talk about things at a little bit more high level and how we just want things to be. I'm Bobby, founder of Be More Digital and a digital consultant in charities, NGOs and social enterprises. And today I'm joined by the very wonderful human, Wayne Murray. Hi, Wayne.
Hey, wonderful human. I can live with that. Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. So do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and how you are that wonderful human, what you've been up to recently?
Yeah, so I'm Wayne. I've been in the charity sector since last century. I'm not old. I suppose the weird thing about me is that half my career has been charity side and half has been agency side. So charity side roles, I've been head of IG at Amnesty. I was head of fundraising and brand at Refugee Action. I was director of fundraising and comms at Prisoners Abroad, which is a tough gig. But a really good one. So lots of sort of human rights charities, lots of mobilisation, lots of sort of step changey type stuff. And for the last 3 years, I've been strategy director at Audience, where I've been looking at kind of strategy from within the fundraising prism, but also beyond it as well, more sort of organizational strategy, tinkering around with service design, even though I'm eminently not qualified for that at all, but seem to have opinions on bits and bobs like that. And I'm just winding up my time at Audience now, finished there at the end of October, and looking at what the sort of future holds really, which is kind of more transformational stuff, enabling charities to make step changes, think a bit different. That's me.
Yeah, and your Twitter recently has been filled with horizontal working and trying to get rid of egos. How are you going to be kind of bringing that forward in your new space as a
yeah, you know, it's not lost on me the kind of the idiocy of someone who's anti-guru standing on a platform and talking about how there shouldn't be gurus. You know, there's a disjoint there, but I'm really aware that, you know, a lot of movement building and a lot of change that's happening. And you're talking about Twitter, just looking at kind of some of the discussions that are happening in social media at the moment seem to be much more decentralized. And I genuinely believe that that's the way forward. And sometimes hierarchy gets in the way of humanity. So one thing that I've learned from lockdown is that a lot of the power and the surge of power has come predominantly from cross-organizational connections rather than connections and hierarchies within your traditional structure of how an organization functions. And that fascinates me really. So I spent a long time over lockdown just trying to connect myself to as many of the good eggs in the sector as I possibly can, you of which are top of that pile, Bobby. It was absolutely brilliant to get to know you.
I mean, your little lockdown chat.
There's a lot.
Your little lockdown chat has definitely been an influencer on this idea. Just thought that it would be good to kind of
thanks, man. That's
record them and share them a bit more widely, so that there's a bit more transparency on what chats are happening. And I'm obviously trying to keep these on a digital and strategic side of things, but understand that actually people who don't see themselves as digital have something to say, and a lot of the things that you talk about in kind of digital ways of working is, you know, if you look at the kind of cross-team functionality and working across teams to try and create digital products and service design, that is all very similar to what you're saying. So yeah, really relevant, and I really wanted to chat to you about it.
I think I speak about this a lot, but when you're talking about how hierarchy doesn't necessarily work in a lot of organizations, like digital is the greatest example of that, because for years, nobody has known where to put the digital team. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you roll back 5 or 10 years, it was like, well, obviously it sits with comms and marketing, and then the fundraising would be like, well, we need some digital stuff to help with fundraising. How do we prioritize and how do we do that? And it's bounced around like a ping pong ball, and then HR get involved, and then it's about service delivery, and the website is our, you know, our shop window for everyone or within organizations. Digital is like the force, it flows through everything. Do you know what I mean? And it shouldn't be a department on its own, or it shouldn't be one person in one department, another person in another department. So I always use that as a really good example of how hierarchies need to be a lot flatter and a lot more horizontal, and kind of that's a really good example of that, I think.
Yeah, I've been trying to work out how to get in the organization I've been working in as a project manager for a while, there's an awkward moment in between the IT and digital comms. So digital comms was a function that was created probably 5-6 years ago in that organization, like to kind of really push forward and be innovative. And at that time, IT was very much the hardware. But since then, they've upgraded to cloud platforms to kind of, well, just before lockdown, to enable people to start working remotely and access servers from wherever they are. And so that the kind of delineation of what IT is and what digital is becomes a little bit more woolly, but also that there's a team of communicators who are, yes, digital communicators that are maintaining hundreds of digital tools for this organization, and with no support, not even oversight from the IT side of things. And it's like, how do you make sure that those conversations happen without just passing the buck on? You know, it's about collaboration and having conversations, and you know, there's benefits from and different experiences from people who are using the tools to do stuff, and obviously like the security expertise and the data protection expertise that come with an old school IT department. And that's kind of there. I've seen it in so many charities, you know, where you've just got so many third-party tools that, you know, a good sales call is
We'll add that on.
because there's no kind of place for kind of an umbrella digital in those organizations. You just end up with having to fix a load of holes.
And I think that looking at it in the terms that I normally look at things at, which is sort of large scale transformational change, how do we make a big step change, constantly try to retrofit things into their current structure. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't work like that. Do you know what I mean? It's what you radically need to do is to sit down with a blank piece of paper and say, okay, well, if we were setting up this charity as a brand new startup now, what would it look like? What would it need? And then it's kind of, how do you evolve from the kind of culmination of bits and bobs that you've got now into where you need to go.
Yeah.
That's a massive, drastic thing for any organization to do, but it's kind of the way it needs to be done, really.
And it becomes even more drastic and difficult when egos get involved.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, we spoke about this in our last ramble chat, and I think there's the other issue around hierarchy within our sector is that as you progress in your career and you take steps up, there's an expectation for leaders to fill sometimes some cookie cutter silhouette of the previous person who had that role, and that expectation comes from the top down. You know, it's from what people don't really understand what that role involves, what they want to see in it. So it's about what the board wants to see in a fundraising director or a digital director or whatever, and less about what's actually needed. And you know, the conversations that we were having is that the knowledge and the understanding generally comes from the bottom up, but the expectation for what the leader needs to look like comes from the top down. So you inherently get this kind of friction in the middle, and I've experienced that myself, you know, where I've been in a senior leader role or have been acutely aware of what's actually needed to transform that organization, but an enormous pressure from above as to, you know, I should be the sharp-suited elder statesman, do you know what I mean, and just have a firm hand on the rudder, when that's precisely what's not needed within the organization. So I'm not being accusatory towards a lot of senior leaders. What I'm doing is empathizing with the position that they're in, and you know, it's how do you break that chain, you know. So when I kick back against hierarchy, I'm not talking about chaos and anarchy. I'm just talking about a new way of kind of visualizing how charities could function going forward.
And when you were that statesman figure, how did you try to kind of balance out that kind of learning coming up and the expectation down?
I think the simple answer is I left because Nelly had a nervous breakdown. Because you're being pulled in multiple directions all of the time. So yeah, well, not, you know, not, it was just really tough. And I think that's another thing that happens, and I see quite a lot in the sector, is that people genuinely fired up and genuinely want to change things, and then they get worn down by the machinery of organizations and the, you know, the process and the protocol and the 18 levels of sign off and all of that stuff. And it's really, really hard to unpick. But, you know, I'm seeing leaders who are doing it at the moment. And I think the first issue for any sort of transformational change is fundamentally understanding what the issue is. So understanding that tension between what the people coming up understand and are fundamentally right most of the time, and the pressure from above. And it's the leaders who can sort of straddle that and punch up rather than punch down, do you know what I mean? And really challenge boards and challenge senior leadership teams to enable that change. And it's tricky, you know, I've been on, you know, numerous SLT boards myself, and normally in the guise of like fundraising and comms director, and there's a tricky balance of power at SMT level for a fundraising director. Because you're generally, the balance of power is not with the fundraising director at all, because you're the only person around that table who, whether you're good or whether you're bad at your job, is boiled down to a singular number, which is the difference between the money you spend and the money you raise. You know, whether it's the director of service delivery or the IT director or the finance director, there isn't that kind of complete and utter, your job is one number and I know whether you're good or bad. So there's an inherent, you know, the issue of power at SLT level of fundraising comms directors as well, which is really, really tricky. So yeah. It's hard. It's hard. It
is. I've recently been trying to kind of support on some coaching to help someone who is their organization is, well, their team is overwhelmed by the work. And we were having a discussion about dashboards and metrics and what we should do to help show the need. And originally it was like, well, just do want to help the team. But then looking at the estate and what there is, there's so much work to do. You know, you've got 5,000 accessibility errors to go through on just one website, and that's just time to review. And it doesn't mean that there's 5,000 issues, it's just there's 5,000 things that need to be looked at and said whether they need fixing or not. The same with SEO, same with social media. Like they've just got such a wide ranging estate and a team of 7 to deal with it. And you've got kind of constant email requests coming in, multiple social media channels to support, multiple websites, and there's that overwhelm. So for the team, actually showing them what needs to be done is not helpful because it will just lead to burnout. However, showing that to senior leadership and explaining it in a way of, you know, these 5,000 accessibility errors would take one person a month to go through and to review, because they all need proper attention, and then that work needs to continue moving forward. That kind of helps prove the need for more team members. So it's like that's what we've been doing, is like looking at the data and trying to use the data to force and prove the need of more support and more teams. just so that you can kind of have that cross-functional working, because at the moment it's not possible, and the digital team in that organization is just pushing back and saying we can't, and then that then leads to people going off and doing it on their own and not doing it well, and errors being made and more stress and frustration. But you know, with that person that I'm working with, they're at a manager level and they've got 2 or 3 people above them that have absolutely no understanding of digital. So you've also got that kind of training and coaching. So I'm kind of coaching them to coach their manager to then coach their manager, and that is really kind of like those rungs on the ladder just get steeper and steeper.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And from my perspective, like whenever I talk to charities about change, whether it's vocalized or not vocalized, the 2 things that people are thinking about is, bloody hell, that sounds expensive, and 2, that's more work than we're doing at the moment, and we've got an overworked team. So the way I always sort of approach change and transformation is that, you know, taking work away, taking a machete to the program to strip things back, which will enable you to have, you know, headspace and capacity and whatever to be able to do that. And that took me a long time to learn, because, you know, your role within change can sometimes be to come in and double someone's workload when they're already at breaking point anyway. And it's not about, my approach now is very much like, okay, let's look at what you're doing that needs to be done or is being duplicated, and then let's see what capacity we've got, and let's see how we can change within the totality of your 35 hours a week that you've got anyway. It seems to be a better way to do it.
Yeah, I tend to, especially with the small organizations, I tend to look at what's being done, because in those tiny organizations it tends to be that the digital comm side of things, like the website and the social media and the emails, are managed by someone who's also in charge of the fundraising and all of the media and all of the physical marketing, so the print marketing. And so it's like, at that point it's like, okay, so what things do you do on a regular basis? How do you do them? And then we just map them out and see if we can use any kind of sneaky automation tools to make that life easier. So, you know, a couple of months ago I was working with a comms and fundraising manager at a tiny organization, and the trustees demanded a monthly progress report on digital. So we spent a bit of time going through what actually they needed to know, and then training them on what was more useful for them to know, and then creating that for them and sending it automatically using free tools to do it. And yes, that bit took time, but it meant that then on a monthly basis, they weren't spending an entire day creating a report that was going to be looked at and thrown in the bin.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think those sort of processes, you know, the bigger question is kind of questioning why a lot of those processes are in place anyway. Do you know what I mean? And that's a big organizational issue. But sometimes the role of a mid-level manager can just be about bouncing from process to process like this. So I remember one job that I had in the past where reforecasting was like the most important thing for the organization, and the clumsy set of tools that we had to reforecast were just idiotic, but we were in this hamster wheel that, you know, you couldn't get out of it. And I always used to say that reforecasting at this organization happened every month, but it lasted for 5 weeks. Constantly. Meanwhile, great big opportunities are flying by, and the things that I should actually be doing, and the innovations and whatever, you know, you have to question the validity of that, you know, both in terms of why it's necessary, and to what tools, tech and systems have we got to actually do that, you know.
And what's already there as well, like so often.
What do you need? Because, you know, most of those reports aren't actually read. It's just reassuring to people to know that this stuff is happening.
Yeah, it's like my friend calls it the work around the work, which I really like. I love that tool. They have 2 great sayings. They have one saying which is eat a frog every day. So make sure you do a really difficult task every day, so that, you know, the green, horrible, poisonous looking frog, I always write a list of like my frogs for the week, and just sometimes there's too many frogs, and I just have to accept that actually I can't do it all. But the big one is like just questioning if this is work around the work, and if it is, pushing back on it, you know, because it's not necessary.
I'm totally stealing that. That's
it's great, isn't it?
Absolute peach of a phrase. I'm taking definitely. Yeah, no, there's so much of it, and also, you know, I think just in terms of tricks that I've learned along the way, like you can't just bowl in and change an organization overnight. You know, you have to. It's about the mini victories. Do you know what I mean? So always try and solve something that's, you know, really, really relevant, but not particularly massive, and show the impact of that little thing and kind of build up. Even though, you know, from a strategy point of view, that's the wrong way to do it, because you should start with the big whatever. But the reality of working, especially within larger organizations, is that one, you'll never get that brief, and two, that's never going to be the first job that you do, the large scale transformation. So showcase it in a small way, get the backing, especially of the digital team, and build out from there. It's like a sort of radius that comes out and out and out.
Yeah, that's always the way I do it, is kind of tackling.
Sorry, a bit of a tangent, but
no, it works really well. That's the kind of idea of these chats, isn't it? It's just to start with a theme-ish.
Well, if there's anyone who can ramble, you know.
But yeah, I mean, whenever I'm tackled with a digital challenge, quite often I'm approached and it's like, we need a product to do this. And the first question is like, actually, what do you want to achieve? Generally, it's allowing someone to do something more simply, and so that there is some kind of data visualization of it. Mm-hmm. So it might be, quite often what I do is take 52-page PDFs and turn them into some kind of clever form that does something. That seems to be the thing that I'm doing the most of at the moment, just because it's kind of that first step. So the user is used to doing a checklist on a PDF, and then they go, oh, I can do this on a web application. And then the organization gets more information on how many people are actually using that, whether it's useful. That tends to be the thing that I'm doing the most of at the moment. But I will always push back when they go, we need a new app. Yeah. And especially when they say we want a mobile app, like, and one that's in the Play Store or the or iTunes store, because for me it's kind of like an extra step for the person. Like, if they're used to filling out a form that they print out and sending it in, then yeah, that's all right. But actually, if they can just go to a URL and do it, you don't need to keep it up to date. Also, there's obviously accessibility issues and all of that kind of stuff with apps. But yeah, I tend to kind of try and find I mean, it's the skateboard approach. Have you heard of the skateboard? Yeah. I mean, basically, I think everything should be a skateboard before it becomes a car.
Ex-skater right here. So yeah, no, get you on that. But yeah, no, same from my perspective. Do you know what I mean? I like, when I get briefs come in, I like briefs, and it happens very rarely, that talks about a genuine problem. You know, most of the briefs that I get through are people who have kind of skirted around a problem, but what's within the brief is the perceived solution that they want you to deliver. So, you know, in a similar way, it'd be, we need a regular giving product, we need a subscription product, we need, you know, and I constantly push back and say, why? You know, and then you get to sort of like closer to the truth, where it's like, well, you know, we want to be a bigger organization than this charity that we align ourselves to. And it's like, why? And you just keep going, why until you get to the heart of the problem. And the heart of the problem generally isn't a subscription product or a regular given product. It's about finding relevance, being able to connect to a broader tribe of people. You know, it's those sort of issues more than, you know, we need someone else is doing a subscription product, we need one of those.
Oh, so often.
I got into a lot of trouble in my life for doing that. Yeah. Just give me the problem and we can work out the solution together. Don't give me a half-baked solution that you want me to deliver that isn't going to work for either of us. So
Yeah.
that's
We've
the
heard
world
this
I want to live in.
competitor is building this. Can you do the same
Yeah.
for us?
Yeah. And that's another hallmark.
Show me how that solves a problem for the people that you work with.
Yeah. That's another hallmark of our sector, which I genuinely think that the pandemic has sort of shifted a bit. I think it's the first time in a long time that a lot of charities are thinking seriously about different operating models rather than tinkering around the edges of big problems. Because from a strategic point of view, and looking at it through the prism of, say, fundraising hasn't really changed in 20 years. You've got a collection of different products dependent on what sort of charity you are, what brand you are, what budget you've got. You pull different levers on the same machine. We'll have a bit more face-to-face because we can afford it. We'll have some DRTB because we've got a well-known brand. And that's not strategy, that's fiddling around with the same machine. You know, now all of a sudden that machine doesn't work so well anymore. And what we actually need to do is to design bespoke machines for each charity. And I think that's the sort of learning curve that a lot of people need to have, rather than this lemming-like quality of one charity does one thing and then everyone tries to copy it until it doesn't work anymore, and then you wait for another charity to do something and then follow that. And there's this constant running around within the sector, rather than sitting down and going, okay, who are we? What is the social need? How do we fulfill that need? What skill sets? What structure? What infrastructure do we need? Let's build that. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, definitely. I think that's our time up. So I'm gonna say thanks for joining me on my first buddy chat. It's great. I hope that you are happy to come back at another point and tell us more about what you've been up to. I know that you've got loads of stuff going on with Claire Warner as well that you're working on. So maybe Claire would be up for coming and chatting about Mr. Strategy and Mrs. Wellbeing at some point. That would be awesome.
If it does well, we'll come back. If it tanks, we will never speak of it again, right?
I don't think that much you do, thanks. So I'm sure we'll be speaking about it again.
Touching left, right, and centre. But just before we go, first of all, thank you for inviting me on. I really, really rate you. I think you're a brilliant egg, and anything that I can do to support you going forward, I'm well up for it. You're brilliant.